Uh, I appreciate the initiative taken by Mr. Randhir Gautam and Professor Giri in organizing the Vishwaneedam dialogue series, Creative Social Theorizing and Philosophical Pathways for Our Turbulent World. I am grateful for their invitation to speak on the theme Creative Engagement with Social Thought and Indian Society Dialogue with me. Today, I will share key ideas from my sociological contributions as reflected in my books and articles, which draw upon the social conditioning of life experiences across diverse contexts of teaching and research. I will begin by outlining my writings on various themes, followed by their theoretical and methodological application in relation to sociological traditions. I will then briefly discuss with a select empirical and theoretical studies that contribute to building a framework for creative engagement with social thought and Indian society. I have written 25 books and 75 articles in national and international journals. Among them, authored 7, co-authored 2, edited 8, and co-edited 8. So, my sociological contribution provide a wide range of areas, including political sociology, sociology of gender, development sociology, social stratification, inequality, Indian sociology, sociology of India, sociological theory and thought, sociology of globalization, culture and change, sociology of health, introductory sociology, regional sociology, and comprehensive sociology, edited volumes in that. This body of work shows a strong clustering around 3 major axes. Indian sociology is a distinct knowledge tradition. Second, stratification, inequality, and globalization. And third is democracy, development nexus. It also reflects a pedagogical commitment visible in textbooks and introductory works, suggesting engagement with institutional knowledge and productions. My work is marked by a consistent effort to develop a context-sensitive, empirically grounded, and theoretically plural understanding of Indian society, emphasizing the interaction between structure, culture, and power in shaping social transformation in India. I have tried to apply the different classical and contemporary sociological theory and their orientation. Classical sociological theory, which is associated with figures like or scholars like Karl Marx, Emile Durkheim, Max Weber, is marked by grand theory, focus on structure, class, authority, solidity, universalist, and often Eurocentric framework. This reflected in my contribution through political sociology, themes in social stratification, mobility, development, and social transformation. I engage deeply with classical problems, power, stratification, and development, but does not remain confined to their original formulation. Instead, these works reinterpret classical categories, class, state, inequality in the Indian context, especially through caste and regional disparities. My middle path works demonstrate a critical adaptation of classical sociology, especially by provincializing universal theory, integrating caste and class, embedded political process in local structure. This reflects in my books Indian Sociological Thought, Sociology and Sociologist in India. These texts represent a shift from theory application to theory reconstruction. Rather than applying Marx and Weber in India, I foreground Indian thinkers and contexts, aligning with broader colonial and indigenous sociology movements. Uh, Contemporary sociology is characterized by fragmentation of grand theory, focus on identity, culture, and lived experiences, emphasis on globalization, reflexivity, and interdisciplinary. This is strongly represented in my work in the books Globalization, Leisure, and Social Change, Issue and Themes in Contemporary Society, Women and Society, Modernity, Globalization, Social Stratification, Social Exclusion, Inequality, and Protest under Globalization in India. I move toward multidimensional sociology, where class is supplemented by gender, region, and exclusion. Structure is complemented by agency and protest. Nation state analysis is expanded to global process. My work also aligns with applied sociology, a hallmark of contemporary practice uh, through sociology of sanitation. I have written this book also in Hindi, Swachhata Ka Samaj Shastra. These works reflect engagement with policy and development, bridging academia and public issue, movement beyond abstract theory to ground level social problems. My later work show a reflexive turn examining sociology itself, and it reflects in Indian sociologist, which is in the kind of our and another recent book in the Handbook on Indian Sociology. These correspondence to late contemporary sociology, where the discipline reflects on its own epistemology, knowledge production become a subject of analysis, regional and intellectual histories are foreground. My writings represent a bridging trajectory from classical sociology to contextual sociology to contemporary global sociology. My work does not reject classical theory, but resituates it within Indian realities, particularly caste, regional diversity, and post-colonial condition. The latter emphasis on globalization, exclusion, and reflexivity indicates a clear alignment with contemporary and decolonial sociological paradigms. In this sense, my work can be read as a part of a broader epistemic shift in sociology, from universalism to plurality, from theory dominance to contextual knowledge protections. I examine the sociological writings through the dual perspective, Indian sociological tradition and decolonial theory. And this reflects in my various books related to the political sociology, stratification, globalization, and Indian sociological thought, and also applied sociology, which I just told about the sociology of sanitation. You see, in some, my work contributes significantly to epistemic pluralization in Indian sociology and represents a sustained movement toward decolonizing sociological knowledge without explicit theoretical declarations. Sociology emerged in 19th century Europe as a response to industrial capitalism and modern state formation. Foundational theorists such as Marx, Durkheim, Weber constructed universal categories of analysis, class, solidarity, rationalization, and bureaucracy. However, these categories emerged from historically specific European experiences and were later universalized. In India, sociology has long developed critical responses to this universalism. M.N. Srinivas demonstrated the caste operates as a dynamic system of mobility rather than a static hierarchy. A.R. Desai introduced Marxist structural analysis of Indian nationalism. Andhra Bete refined caste, class, power distinction. Yogen Singh argued for civilizational modernization, while T.K. Woman emphasized pluralism and nation building. Gail Omweth foregrounded Dalit struggles and subaltern resistance. Within this intellectual genealogy, I represent a later phase of Indian sociology that integrates classical theory, Indian empirical realities, and contemporary global transformations. Methodologically, I build and extend these traditions. I applied structure, functional perspective, humanistic perspective, Martian perspective, and sometimes contribution of these depending upon the nature of study. Because whatever the method and theory we apply, we should look at to the context of the study also. So I try to apply the different methods also, systematic and integrative fieldwork, subjective and objective method, quantitative and qualitative method, analytical approach, and learner-friendly approach. This different type of the theory and methods, according to context, I try to apply it. Then actually, these whatever the studies I have done it, I try to analyze in my book Sociology and Sociologist in India Northwest Perspectives, and all the different books I have put in the 8 categories: political sociology, sociology of development, perspective of Indian society, sociology of profession, social deviance, and sociology of environment, sociology of sanitation, and sociology of weaker section. But today I would like to share a few studies, empirical studies, and also some theoretical writings written in the form of the textbooks. My major contribution has in political sociology, especially through my seminal work, Factionalism, Politics and Social Structure. I have done, this is my PhD work, and I have done field study in Rajasthan, particularly in Udaipur district, from village to district and district to state and nation. I try to link with the different factions of intra and intra-party. Factionalism is explained as a product of interaction between structural factors, caste, class, kinship, and political ideological process mobilized through leadership and interest. It varies regionally due to historical and feudal legacy, especially in Rajasthan, as I have done studying. It is largely an elite-driven phenomenon rather than a mass-based conflict. It operates across level, village, district, state, and nation. I bridge the gap between sociological and anthropological studies, which is focused on village and village structure, whereas political science approaches focus on ideology and parties. I demonstrate that both are incomplete unless integrated. Caste, class, party politics intersect. Agrarian structure influences political conflict. Feudal residues continue to shape modern politics. My later edited work or edited volume in the name of in the title Political Sociology explained the framework of examining state-society relation, political socialization, political modernization, elite theory and power structure, ethnicity, communism, social movements. I emphasize the need for an indigenous political sociology, sensitive to Indian historical specificity rather than dependent on Western models. The problem is the studies are fragmented and unsystematic research tradition in India. There is a need for integration of structure, culture, and ideology. I have done also in my early studies when I joined at Rohtak. I had the opportunity to do some field work and small studies in medical college Rohtak. So early studies related to deviance, mental health, and social structure. I treat mental illness as a social phenomenon, linking deviance to social structure. This aligns with the Durkheim's concept of anomy and Marx's idea of alienation and Weber's concern with the rationalizations and disenchantment. In my early research, I focused on deviance, mental illness, and social structure. Treating mental disorder is not merely a medical condition, but as a social phenomenon shaped by structural and cultural context. In my study of deviant behavior as an outcome of mental disorder, I found how mental illness is socially constructed and linked to the labeling socially, expectations, and institutional responses. My empirical work at Rohtak Medical College demonstrated that mental disorder as socially recognized deviance. Further, in my another paper, Social Structure and Mental Disorder, and my work on schizophrenia, I established that mental illness is influenced by family stress, socio-economic conditions, and role conflict. It is more prevalent among socially vulnerable groups. There exists a strong link between social structure and psychological breakdown. I criticize psychiatric institutions as a total institution producing depersonalizations and powerlessness. Now I would like to share I have written two textbooks and I have just share the idea about the empirical studies. Now I am sharing the ideas which is analysis on the basis of writings available, particularly in theoretical context. So my book, which is become a textbook, that is Indian Sociological Thought, related to the perspective on Indian society and sociology. It is a thematic integration. I conceptualize Indian society as a multi-perspective, illustrated through the a metaphor, much like the story of a blind man and the elephant, is interpreted through partial and diverse perspective. I try to define Indian society. Constitutionally, it is defined as a democratic, secular, plural, industrial, and scientific. However, alternative visions such as Gandhian moral society, Hindutva based cultural nationalism, and revolutionary Naxalite thought reveal competing ideological construction. This plurality reflects what Emile Durkheim would call the complexity of collective representation, while Karl Marx highlight underlying class conflict and Max Weber emphasizes the role of ideas, values, and rationality. I do not reject Western sociology. Instead, I critically incorporate it alongside Indian intellectual tradition. My work systematically organizes these perspectives in Indian sociological thought. I present Indian society as a historically evolving through monarchy, feudalism, colonialism, and democracy. I highlight how caste, class, tribe, and religion shape Indian social structure. I stress the need to interpret these not through imported categories alone, but through context sensitive analysis. This reflects a key feature of creative engagement, adapting theory to context rather than mechanically applying Western models. I included both Indian and Western scholars who studied in India. I examine how their frameworks intersect, conflict, and complement each other. This is a dialogical approach where knowledge emerges through interaction, not isolation of traditions. My central contribution lies in bridging multiple perspectives of Indian and Western sociological thought into dialogue. In my work, Indian Sociological Thought, I synthesize contribution of major thinkers like Kosambi, Gure, Srinivas, Ambedkar, Dumo, Yogen Singh Bete, etc. And I systematically present their perspective in such a way, for example, Indological, textual, structural, functional, Marxist, cultural, civilization, subaltern. But I argue that no single perspective explains Indian society. Sociology must integrate scientific and humanistic approach. Indian society requires plural, historical, grounded analysis that is creative engagement across tradition. Thus, my creative engagement is about pluralizing sociology, not replacing one paradigm with another. My another textbook, Introducing Sociology, which is my co-author was S.B. Singh, this provides foundational concepts, sociological perspective, and research methods. In this book, we frame sociology as the study of social life, institutions, and relationship. Like Durkheim, he stresses the scientific study of society. Like Weber, he values interpretive understanding. And like Marx, he acknowledged structural inequality. Sociology for us provides a new orientation to understand social reality beyond individual experience. It aims to develop critical thinking, awareness of social structure, application of sociology to everyday life. My writing is also important pedagogically contribution as making sociology dialogue. I organize sociological thought into comparative frameworks, encourages students to see sociology as interpretative, contested, not fixed. In this sense, creative engagement is also a method of learning sociology through comparison, critique, and in synthesis. A recurring theme in my work is the need for indigenization of sociology, use of native concepts and categories in analyzing Indian society. My discussion on contextualization and sociology for India show that society must be epistemologically grounded in social realities, not just empirically applied. This is a core dimension of creative engagement, reworking knowledge framework within the society being studied. In my edited volume, like Indian Sociology, Theory, Domains and Emerging Concern, it reflects, I contribute to mapping new thematic domain, caste transformation, disabilities, globalization, etc., linking classical theory with contemporary issues, moving toward global, local, or global sociology. This reflects a forward-looking engagement, connecting Indian sociology to planetary and comparative debates. Thus, my sociology reflects as I told, the elephant metaphor. Indian society can only be understood through multiple intersecting perspective rather than a single unified theory. My central contribution lies in demonstrating that Indian society must be understood through multiplicity of perspective, interplay of structure, culture, and power, commitment to social justice and inclusion. My contribution to creative engagement with social thought and Indian society can be summarized as synthesis of diverse sociological tradition, contextualization of theory with Indian realities, dialogue between Western and Indian perspective, Western and indigenous perspective, indigenization of concepts and methods, expansion toward contemporary and global concern. Rather than proposing a single theory, my significance lies in creating a framework for engaging creatively with multiple traditions, making Indian sociology both rooted and reflexive. Thank you very much.
1980s or even earlier to that, I found him what we know as personality in move. And this personality in move, in fact, how imagine sociology is a very interesting kind of deliberation. The diversity and the plurality which we find in his understanding, in his writings, and the deliberations. I think he is a true representative of that multidimensionality which constitute the empirical sociology on the one hand and ideological plurality-led discourse in the field of social sciences. This is what Professor Nagla is doing. And I'm, in fact, lucky in the sense that I have a very close relationship with Professor Nagla in terms of three dimensions. He is a very affectionate friend to all of us, number one. And that friendship, in fact, constructs those type of social relationship led by the values of affinity and commitment, which in fact constitutes the thematic dimension of sociology. This is one. Second, he is a prolific writer. I do not know how much time he takes rest. Continuous writing, continuous deliberation, continuity in terms of making academic interaction with lot of persons, with lot of people. This is what construction of sociology takes place when Professor Nagla interacts and acts, and that appears in the form of writing, which in fact he has produced. This is number two. Number three, the social sphere or academic sphere of Professor Nagla is too wide. In fact, he interacts with each and every one. The interviews which he has taken for Bharatiya Samajshastra Samiksha, then they have been published in English also. It appears that Professor Nagla moves to various sociologists of first generation or second generation and then stimulates them to discuss so many things and to write on various issues. He is a very friendly person. So his several books are in the honor of Professor Yogendra Singh, Professor K.L. Sharma. So I think this kind of personalities in the field of social sciences, particularly in India, is very rare. This is what his personality is. Now, when I was trying to understand his seminal work called Factionalism, Politics, and Social Structure, in fact, in this book, it has also presented in the form of one article. I have gone through that article, which has been edited by Professor Nagla itself. Factionalism, in fact, in the field of polity, political parties. Now, that intra-factionalism and interfactionalism based upon several kind of social issues make positive as well as adverse effect as far as the formation and the development of political parties are concerned. So how politics is constituted by intra and interfactionalism. Professor Nagla has examined the role of Pirjamandal, then what happened when Mohanlal Sukhadia was Chief Minister of Rajasthan. So several kind of things related to political party known as Congress, related to several social organizations, the formation of other political parties, the impact of feudal order on this factionalism, how gender, caste, religion, ownership over land and other issues contribute to the inter and intra-factionalism and constitute that political party which in fact becomes a mirror to examine the social structure. So several kind of comparative approach which has been used by Professor Andre Betai, Anil Bhatt, etc., etc. Similarly, one kind of comparative approach is found when I go with this kind of work, which is Seminal Forum Factionalism, Politics and Social Structure, published by Rawat Publication. In fact, Rawat has produced several quality books for which that publication is known, and he has made a very effective contribution to make Professor Nagla's contribution public. This is one. Second book, which is related to Professor Nagla and Shobal Singh, is Introducing Sociology. And this is a textbook. Hindi version of this book is also available. In this textbooks, several concepts, methodological dimensions, processes, process of interactions, means what is desired for graduation and post-graduation, they have been presented. But it is my humble request to Professor Nagla to introduce something which is related to ideological and theoretical dimensions as far as formation of concepts are concerned. In fact, these concepts are very much known in the world of sociology. But how these concepts are undergoing the process of transformation because of what he has talked about, fragmentation. So what fragmentation is contributing, what social transformation is contributing, what political transformation is contributing, what cultural shift is contributing to understand the entire global order, entire world order. So if this kind of world order is going on with the major processes of change and transformation, including the possibilities of violence and war, the possibilities of Third World War, how can we introduce and transform those concepts and theories which constitute the foundational sociology, but we have to shift from that foundational sociology to what radical sociology, humanistic sociology, and reflexive sociology are doing nowadays. So this is one which I think very important to make contributions in the field of Indian social sciences. Secondly, the most interesting book which he has written for the students like us, Indian Sociological Thought. And several editions are also there. And it's a very popular book. For the first time, I have gone through a book of sociology in which the contribution of Robila Thapar and D.D. Kosambi have been mentioned. So historians are there. And it is very interesting because sociology, in fact, is a paradigmic and multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary domain of knowledge. It's a very pluralistic and diverse kind of knowledge system. So these persons or these personalities should be known with their contributions in the field of social sciences also. So what Robila Thapar talks about caste, what D.D. Kosambi talks about the evolution of Indian history and its civilization, I think for us, it is the responsibility of the students of sociology and social sciences to understand all these things. One very interesting observation which I am going to make, Professor Nagla. Recently, Robila Thapar has written a very debatable, timely debatable book, Our History, Their History, Whose History? This is the title. Can I raise a question to you? Is it possible to talk about now in this world of exclusion, in this world of marginalization, in this world where othering and identities have become significant? Can we also talk about our sociology, their sociology, whose sociology? In fact, this question must be raised by the students of sociology, by the students of social sciences, because othering is there, exclusion is there, marginalization is there. Several kind of oppressive tendencies have been institutionalized, not only in South Asia or East Asia, in fact, entire globe. The sovereignty of several countries are under deep crisis. Uh, the corporate world is trying to control over the resources, monopolizing over the resources rather. So, can we introduce this kind of questions? Whose sociology? Our sociology, the sociology of majority, the sociology of the powerful sections of society, or our sociology, the sociology of Dalits, the sociology of Adivasis, the sociology of marginalized sections, the sociology of children, the sociology of women, the sociology of rural world, the sociology of landless people, and on the other side, their history or their sociology, sociology of the powerful sections of society, sociology of those elites who are creating a world of social environment in which everything which has been accepted by the state and the corporate world have become the thought process, have become the system of knowledge. So their history, their sociology, and whose sociology? So I think these questions need a very interesting kind of debate in the field of social sciences in the present era. A shift is taking place in the field of social sciences, particularly in the field of history. And I think history is a sociology of past. So the processes which are taking place in history are equally applicable to the field of sociology. So a shift is taking place in the field of history. History was a method, but now history is history has been treated as a tool of identity and authority. Is it possible to introduce sociology in this context? Can sociology sociology is used also can sociology becomes the tool for identity and authority? It can be used as a tool for creating identities and authorities. Yes, in my opinion, it is possible. Michael Burawe was raising this issue when he was talking about the issues of Philistine, when he was talking about several kinds of sociological division of labor. So I think this kind of understanding should be there. And it is very interesting to note that all these issues are symbolically presented when I was reading Indian sociologists a conversation. It's a conversation, means interviews with the 17 sociologists. And it is a classical work. These 17 sociologists have spoken several aspects of global sociology, regional sociology, and Indian sociology. In fact, you have made a very remarkable contribution in the sense that you have created a world of textbooks on the one hand and theoretical constructions on the other side. So a textbook which is usable for the commoners, and some theoretical and conceptual works which can be used by senior students of sociology like us who are still in the process of understanding several kind of sociological theories. And similarly, you have talked about local sociologies, regional sociology, national sociology, and global sociology. So how bricks constitute each brick, the book which you was mentioning, Sociology and Sociologists in India, Perspectives from the Northwest. This is a brick, and several kinds of bricks which are coming up in coming publication, which will be more classical, or rather the foundational for Indian sociology. These bricks constitute the structure of totality as far as Indian sociology, sociology in India, and sociology for India are concerned. And I'm sure that this kind of work, which will be coming in the later half, in the first week or second week of next month, I think it will be a very effective contribution to the field of Indian sociology. I think several books which you have written, uh, may lead to our understanding. You have talked about with Kameshwar Chaudhary regarding modernity, globalization, and social stratification. Now, how social stratification becomes important when we talk about in terms of right approach, हमारे अधिकार क्या हैं, and when we talk about the approach related to responsibilities and duties. State is now adamant to talk about duties and responsibilities and attacking the right structures everywhere. So what will be the impact of this kind of clash between rights and responsibilities on structure of social stratification? I think this kind of indication we find in the work of Amrit Sen, and you have also pointed out several things in this book related to modernity, globalization, and social stratification. Again, it is a kind of comparative approach having interdependence between modernity. But one question which is coming up in my mind again and again: is modernity a product of the industrialization only? Because when we read Modernization of Indian Tradition by Professor Yogen Singh, somewhere it also appears that in the past, during the course of feudalism, during the course of slavery, the contradictions between culture, the contradictions between production relations, the contradictions between social relations, they led to several kind of alternatives. Can we talk about those alternatives as the possible modernities, which in later course again become tradition, and this kind of dialectics and dilemma go on? So this is one which can be discussed upon on the basis of this book, and another book which has been written by under your editorship with Professor Modi, themes in social stratification, with Professor Arvinder Agrawal. This is again an important work because on the basis of this book, we can talk about several dimensions related to stratification and mobility, which is in the honor of Professor K.L. Sharma. And I think what Professor K.L. Sharma has contributed to the field of sociology is reflected in your work. What Professor Yogen Singh has contributed it is again reflected in your work, and I think this is the impact of Jawaharlal Nehru University and all these scholars. Professor Yogen Singh was also in Rajasthan. You was also in Rajasthan. Professor K.L. Sharma also belongs to Rajasthan. So what you have understood in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh is now reflected in the field of sociology, and you are a true successor of Professor Yogen Singh and true successor of that intellectual legacy on which Professor K.L. Sharma is doing. And with this combination, you are also interested in creating an independent legacy where Indian sociology and Indian social sciences can be understood by using several approaches related to history, economics, political science, and humanities. I think I must congratulate your contributions, and I must congratulate Professor Madhu Nagla, without whose effective academic contribution, I think this work or this kind of encyclopedic work was not possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Gupta. I have been able to reconnect. Thank you, Abhishek, for nurturing. Thank you, Professor Nagla. So now we invite Professor Arvinder Ansari, please.
Professor Ananta, and it's always pleasure to listen to Professor Nagla and the comments by Rajiv Gupta. I think they have said more. Professor Rajiv Gupta has given such a holistic commentary. There remains very less to talk. But since I would like to share my views. One, yes, of course, I would like to congratulate Professor Nagla on the work he has done. His engagement with sociology has been immense. And we see the way he has nurtured and he has contributed in terms of his writings, which Professor Gupta has also already, mentioned in his comments. Uh, you know, of course, I would first like to comment on the work which Professor Nagla has done. And when we look at the body of work which he has written and has made contribution to sociology, and particularly Indian sociology, is very important effort to develop context sensitive, empirically grounded, and theoretically plural framework. So, as he himself also pointed out, that his work bridges classical Indian and contemporary global sociology rather than simply applying Western theories. It interprets and reconstructs classical categories such as class, power, and stratification within the specific realities of Indian society, especially caste, regional diversity, and post colonial conditions. In doing so, it contributes to what we may call the provisionalization of universal theory and the strengthening of indigenous sociological traditions, and his future dream that he wants to write on indigenization of sociology, or sociology for India. So we know that at this age also he's a mentor who is, kind of motivating all of us, and he's always on his toes, writing, reading, and contributing consciously and actively. Of course, Professor Nagla, the major area of your contribution, which you mentioned, is a political sociology, where you have undertaken the analysis of factionalism, political socialization, and power structures, which demonstrate that politics in India is deeply embedded in social structure and cultural processes. Political conflicts and social movements are thus understood not in isolation, but as outcomes of dynamic interaction between culture, structure, and power, as is visible from your work. And equally, it is very important to understand the expansion of sociology into applied and interdisciplinary domains, particularly in areas which you have mentioned in your work on sociology of sanitation, mental health is very important. This empirical work in medical settings shows that mental illness must be understood not only as a biological condition, but as socially structured phenomena shaped by inequality, institutional context, and lived experiences. Bringing in empiricism is very important, and everyday reality and everyday life is something which is very important. So, this definitely reflects your broader commitment to linking theory with ground level social realities and policy concerns. Your work also makes notable contribution to Indian sociological thought, which Professor Gupta has elaborated, offering a plural and dialogical framework that brings diverse intellectual traditions, Gandhian, Marxist, subaltern, and cultural perspectives. It emphasizes that Indian society can only be understood through multiple intersecting lenses rather than any single unified theory. Very important, you have brought in the idea of reflexivity. And it is very important that we engage and we bring in reflexivity in our engagement when we talk and when we have conversations in sociology, because engaging with questions of epistemology, knowledge, production, and the discipline itself is very important. It is very important to position ourselves. And when you are talking about also decolonial sociology, it is very important to mention about epistemic pluralities, which you kind of in your conversation was trying to say. So now this is very important contribution which lies in building, or we would say what you have mentioned, bridging frameworks. So one needs to connect the different traditions of sociology. Very aptly pointed out Professor Gupta also, the link between global, Indian, regional sociology becomes very important, and the stand positionality here becomes very important. Empiricism becomes very important, and everyday reality becomes very important. So the local realities should shape the global debates, thereby advancing sociology that is both rooted, reflexive, and socially engaged. If I would say that, coming to Professor Gupta's comment where he talks about that there is a shift in sociological paradigm which calls us moving beyond foundational classical sociology towards radical humanistic and reflexive sociology, which is very important to understand the global crisis, war, violence, systemic instability, and why are we silent? Why are we silent? The Fall of Public Man by Richard Sennett tells us that, what happens to this authenticity. I think we are not talking about indifference. We are not talking about this silence. And that is something where, the relevance of sociology is very important, and it is very important to emphasize this transformation in advancing our intellectual contribution. So, of course, interdisciplinarity is becoming very important, and sociology kind of welcomes this, because Professor Gupta was mentioning that you have included, I have not read, I must confess, Promila Thapar and Didi Kosambi in your work, and this is very important. Why this is important? This is important because it positions sociology as multi-paradigmatic, interdisciplinary, and plural. So, it's important that sociology engages with history, sociology, and broader social sciences. Pedagogical significance is very important. So, what Professor Gupta was saying, that, we need to move from student-oriented textbooks to intellectually rich texts, talking about theories which are aligned with the everyday lives, the new permutations, combinations coming up in society. You see, very interestingly, what we see, the minoritization of minorities, or the marginalization of minorities, because that is the area in which I engage. Now, this minoritization or marginalization is a process which has lot to talk. There is lot to hold conversation, but we avoid conversation. We don't want to talk about hate. We avoid discussions on radicalization of politics, radicalization of religion. So these are very important concerns. They are provocations, and these provocations are very important when Professor Gupta says we talk about who's sociology. So is sociology losing its universalism? Becomes a very, very important question. So it's very important that when we talk about sociology, the sociology has to respond to the questions of exclusion, marginalization, identity politics, othering. I understand that it's a epistemological challenge, but of course, it is important. And I think when we are talking about 75 years of Indian sociology, when this year, when we are celebrating, Platinum Jubilee of Sociology, it is very important. It calls for decolonizing of sociology, questioning ownership, voice, and representation in knowledge production. And it is very important that we recognize multiple sociologies rather than kind of ignoring the stand positionality, the locations, the regional importance. And I really congratulate the organizers of this discussion, especially giving a very, very important and significant title to this: creative engagement with social thought in Indian society, which calls for reimagining social thought beyond textbooks, because creative engagement requires us to move beyond repetitions towards reinterpretation, understanding ourselves and our lives in different contexts. So in India, social thought must be understood as something that is not only written in text, but also performed in everyday life. It is visible in the ways community negotiate identity, the silent resistance embedded in everyday practices, the cultural expressions, songs, poetry, rituals that carry social meanings. Therefore, creative engagement involves reading society not just through books, but through lived experiences, narratives. It's not, reading sociology, it is also feeling sociology, which becomes very important. And also, it is very important that how do we bring creativity in methodology? How do we expand sociological inquiry? And how do we kind of speak of methodological innovations? So now we cannot, afford to remain confined to our conventional tools. We have to have new ways. We have to move beyond structured interviews, which are very important, but we have to explore narratives. I mean, if you look at the gender, the way Urvashi Butalia has brought in understanding history from the feminist perspective, where she, brings in narratives as a tool of her study, and these thick descriptions, these ethnographic immersions become so very important. And now, friends, with coming up of visual sociology and digital ethnography, it is very important that we engage with literature, cinema, and art as a social text. So, of course, Professor Nagla's work is very significant in telling us how do we bridge these divides, how do we kind of foster interdisciplinary thinking. And it is very important that Indian society should try to understand social reality not through single disciplinary lens, but sociological inquiry must converse with history to understand trajectories of change, anthropology to grasp cultural meanings, political science to analyze power structures, gender studies to cover layered inequalities, and literature, philosophy to engage with questions and meanings of ethics, because interdisciplinary is not only academic exercise, it's a way of doing justice to the complexity of Indian society, where we see that cultural diversity and ethics of representation is very important, and it is seeking our attention. India's diversity is not only a subject of study, it's a lived reality shaped by hierarchies and exclusions. As a sociologist, we must ask whose voices are being heard, whose experiences are being represented, and how. Are we speaking about communities, or are we engaging with them? So this creative approaches, which involve or which rotate around narratives, participatory methods, collaborative research, allows for more inclusive forms of knowledge production. So it is very important to understand social change through the structure of experience. That is very important when we speak of development, modernization, globalization. We need to look deeper and encourage students to ask questions. How are these processes experienced at grassroots? How do individuals negotiate between tradition and modernity? Professor Gupta brought in the question, the very seminal work of Yogendra Singh, Modernization of Indian Tradition. How do individuals negotiate between tradition and modernity? It's a challenge. When we talk about women, we talk about modern women in a very different context, and the traditional women are completely in a context where she has no agency. But when we look at examples from Indian society, we find the traditional, the women in past had a lot of agency. They exercised their agency. And in fact, it's modern women, they need to learn so much from the writings of Fulle, Fatima Sheikh, to understand. And also, Gail Ombett's work becomes very significant when we try to understand social change, not merely through structure, but also experience and emotions. So it's very important that, also this makes me to talk. I'm concluding, but I would really like to talk about public sociology, which is very important, and it is now high time that sociology moves towards public sociology. Borough's concept and engagement with public sociology is very important, because in today's world, where misinformation and polarized narratives are dominating public discourse, sociologists have a responsibility to offer nuanced, evidence-based, and empathic understanding of societies. So, creativity in this sense also involves how we communicate, making complex ideas accessible without diluting their depth. Therefore, friends, when we say, creativity, when we talk about, creative engagement with social thought, I think creativity comes to us as a responsibility. Creative engagement with social thought is not a optional embellishment. It is a scholarly and ethical responsibility, which allows us to do justice to the richness of Indian society, innovate our methods and perspectives, engage more meaningfully with the world around us. And I'm sure, Professor Nagla's work holds a lot of promise for us. And I'm sure, maybe he's forthcoming when he says that he wants to engage for sociology for India, or indigenization of sociology. There needs a lot to discuss about this word indigenous, what indigenous means for us. Indigenous knowledge system is becoming the buzzword, but what actually does indigenous sociology is very important. So what I feel that in a society as layered and dynamic in India, sociology must remain alive, responsive, and imaginative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ansari. Now, Sipra, please. Dr. Sipra Sagarika, who teaches at Fakir University, Balasore, Odisha.
Yes, thank you, Anant sir. My sincere gratitude to Anant Giri sir for organizing this talk today. My regards to Professor Nagla, Professor Rajiv Gupta sir, and Arvinder ma'am, and Satish sir. This is actually a great privilege on my part to engage on extensive works of Nagla sir, and my work becomes more easier when already Nagla sir has elaborated about his experiences and works which he has done from his initial stages to the latter on, along with what Rajiv sir said and Arvinder ma'am said. What makes this entire dialogue more enriching is the pathway in which Nagla sir has, covered his journey, because the combination of his field works and the writings what he has contributed to the understanding of Indian society and sociology widely shows his presence in terms of understanding sociology in both functions and structures of Indian society. What Arvinder ma'am was referring towards, a kind of inclusive approach, what needs to be exercised in sociology has been always a basic foundation for Nagla sir's work. His wide engagements with mental illness and mental issues, the way he has tried to understand this particular problem is very often not much spoken about. And in a society like in Indian society, where we find that our familial relationships and interpersonal relationships are quite strong, many a times mental illness and mental problems are not being recognized as it should be. So, whatever Sir has tried to contribute and understand regarding mental issues and illness is a path trending guidance for all the scholars and all people who are interested in understanding mental illness and health. Keeping this basic understanding, the next thing what makes interesting to understand about Nagla's understanding is what Arvinder ma'am was referring towards, the public sociology. He has tried to pick up a very, very important component about public sociology, or practicing and understanding of sociology in public sphere, which is referred to how sanitation in Indian society is understood. So his work on sanitation, problems of sanitation in India, does culture matters in 2020, is a deep rooted understanding of society sanitation across several variables like urban, rural settlements, urbanization, modernization, caste, class, and tribal interactions to that. And how the concept of untouchability or social exclusion has come across so many years in Indian society, and still it has been getting reflected in areas of sanitation and areas of how modernization and urbanization is taking up such kind of public issues in sociology of practice. He is analyzing many aspects in sanitation, and he is trying to make us understand that beliefs, practices, and customs of people determine a lot about the sanitation and understanding of sanitation in Indian society. So this is a kind of really, a timely contribution to how the Indian society is making shift from one aspect to other aspect. Similarly, one of his another important work refers to how he tries to understand about ecology, culture, and development in one of his book named Environment, Development, and Sustainability in India. Perspective, issues, and alternatives. Here, he tries to go beyond the debate of how development and essence and aesthetics of nature can be preserved. Rather, he wants to explain a kind of cultural ecology approach through which we can understand society at a greater level. And he discusses how ecology and environment are dichotomous in nature, but development, when it comes in the context, tries to make a lot of intervention in the entire process of understanding the ecology and environment. So finally, he examines the relationship between ecology, culture, development, and tries to bring a more meaningful aspect to human beings and environment, a kind of co-nurturing, which always Anand sir emphasizes. He tries to see such kind of a co-nurturance in the entire process. And as Nagla sir was also saying that he has tried to, a kind of categorize eminent contributions of a Northwestern sociologist. And he has also tried to, bring a new incarnation to whatever we have seen in the Samaj Shastra understanding of the Hindi Journal of Indian Sociological Society, Samiksha. He has in a way brought all those conversations and interviews back to his one of the major contribution of Indian sociologist, Conversations, which was published in 2024 by Rawat. And in this, he captures almost 17 sociologists in the country whose contribution to sociology has immensely brought a path trending, pattern to understand Indian society. So there are so many interviews like of Andhra Bitesh, Suma Chitnis, and IP Desai, DN Dhanagri, Jayant Dele, TN Madan, Ramakrishna Mukherjee, Ratan Naidu, TK Oman sir, Yogendra Singh sir, and many more sociologists who has been in conversation with our contemporary sociologists, those who are working for the forwardingness and practice of sociology in all aspects of Indian society, and he has very beautifully captured it. And as Rajiv sir was saying that Rawat publication has been a kind of major role setter in terms of recognizing what Nagla sir has thought upon and has written across all these areas and branches of sociology. This seminal work also brings a lot of importance in terms of understanding sociology. And nonetheless, to mention sir's contribution on Indian sociological thought is a very, very classic book which has been extensively referred across all the states of the country by scholars in terms of undergraduation, post graduation, because as we see how like a kind of multicultural understanding of Indian society is there. It's a vast thing to be, encapsulated and cultured into a particular theme. But Nagla sir's contribution has helped it to streamline, and it has become more easier for students and scholars to understand how Indian sociology can be understood from multi perspectives, and it can be understood through several dimensions. So, with this, I would like to again express my heartiest gratitude for giving me this opportunity to speak on this platform. And I really congratulate organizers, Professor Giri, Randhir ji, and Minati madam, to organize such kind of creative conversations once and again among us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sipra Sagarika. Dhanyabad. So now we invite Professor Sharma, please, Satish Kumar Sharma, a long-time friend and also the thought brother of Professor Nagla. So Professor Sharma, please.
Thank you, Professor Giri. After a long time, though I saw your pic in the Facebook a couple of days ago, and often come across that. And it's always a pleasure to meet you whenever we are together at some place, though after long times. Let me begin with my thanks to the organizer, particularly Randhir, Gautam, and you, and the organization which you have all formed to carry on with such kind of dialogue, which I think is very, very necessary, especially for our upcoming younger colleagues, friends, and also our students. A lot has been said by Nagla himself, Professor Nagla himself, about his work, and which are all acknowledged in India, and many of his books are part of the recommended readings in the syllabi of many universities. And Professor Rajiv Gupta has already talked about Professor Nagla and his works. And our contemporary colleague, Professor Ansari, then Sipra, both of them have referred to Dr. Nagla's contribution. So I don't need to repeat all that, what has already been said. But one may therefore just sum up briefly. Professor Nagla's works present a wide range of conceptual, methodological, theoretical, dimensions of sociology in general and sociology in India, because of which he is connected with the senior and senior most sociologist of our country, as well as with hum umers, as well as the budding sociologists. And I feel honored to have been associated with Professor Nagla since 1980s, when we first time met at Punjab University. And later on, we have been together founding of Northwest Indian Sociological Association with, along with Professor Paramjit Jaj and some other colleagues. And then, laying a kind of a platform for students and the faculty fraternity of Northwest to meet minimum annually, come together and present their views, share their views with each other. Besides what I said, also had the privilege to have contributed a chapter in his recently published work, Perspectives in Indian Sociology. However, all what I have said, after that I feel that I'm no match to his contribution to sociological understanding of Indian society and sociology in India. In my understanding, when we are talking about creative engagement with social thought, besides making analytical distinctions between creativity, and the creator I would like to refer here is to the thinker or the philosopher who tries to formulate his ideas on the basis of his contemplation about the existing phenomenon, contradictions of the society. There is also need to understand comprehensively the psychosocial processes or psychosocial dimensions, as well as the structural processes which underlie social thought in the context of a society or in the understanding of a particular phenomenon. The underlying assumption here being there always exists a definitive relationship between creativity, psychosocial, and structural processes. And therefore, creativity and creative primarily constitute interwoven processes of thought. And the creator constitutes an agency which is central to the entire thought process, which is central to the perception and understanding of the existing environment, the existing social, cultural, the material conditions, and therefore which manifest into certain kind of impressions, opinions, ideas, which finally culminate into thoughts in a given context and at a given point of time. And when I look at Professor Nagla's contribution in different areas, in fact, he has tried to include almost all the existing areas in which the students of sociology are often engaged. And so therefore, what he has tried to do is that in each of his works, he has tried to bring out this particular aspect or bring out this dimension to our understanding that what I said, that these processes become essential to understand. And it is because of which one is able to, like he said, I reject psychiatry. So it is only possible when one is able to understand the social, psychological, and the structural processes which create mental health conditions in a particular society. So being a process, creative engagement, it must also be noted that it's not something spontaneous or something which is accidental, but it is something which is constructed over a period of time, and this construction takes place in the process of interaction, which goes on continuously without any interruption in society. The interruptions occur when we are not giving attention to these processes, ongoing processes, or when we stop contemplation about what is going on in the society. So therefore, formulation of ideas is always possible within the framework of given material and non-material conditions, to which he has also tried to refer to in a very simple, in a logical manner, as well as in a way which is intelligible to all who are listening or who are studying his works. Now, it may also be noted here that the process of conceptualization and cognization of certain forms of thinking always involves methodological implications, and which are very important in the actualization of specific thought process and in the formulation of particular type of thought, as well as in making sure the ultimate outcome. And one can imagine how long Professor Nagla must have been engaged in this particular process of understanding Indian society or different phenomenon, whether in the field of political sociology or in the field of, one may say, perspectives on Indian sociology, or in the field of deviant behavior, and so forth. Now, having said all this, I would like to focus on 2-3 things which I think are very important, and which are also and which have been part of Professor Nagla's studies. Now, this goes back to mid-1970s, at a time when I was also doing my master's degree in sociology. And one such area in which I tried to engage myself was sociology of deviant behavior. And why I got interested into this, because before that, I also had the opportunity to teach deviant behavior, sociology of deviant behavior, criminology, penology in MS University of Baroda, where Professor Nagla also taught for a semester or so, or a year. But that was before I joined that university. Unlike his assertion of rejecting psychiatry, I would like to suggest that psychiatry without social psychiatry is partial and incomplete. And this is a fact which has been also recognized worldwide since 1970s, and particularly when the World Health Organization adopted certain remedial measures which to them were essential in order to reduce emphasis on psychiatry as a as an intervention which involved, prescribing sedatives or some stimulants to the patients depending upon their mental health or depending upon their mental condition. So the point which I want to raise here is that I cannot therefore outrightly reject psychiatry. Rather, I would like to say that psychiatry needs to be supplemented by social psychiatry. And the social psychiatry, therefore, also emphasizes on understanding what I suggested are essential in the understanding of creative processes or in the development of creative thought, and that is the psychological, social psychological, and the structural processes which have long lasting impact on the human individuals and their behavior and their reaction to the society. And therefore, it's very important that we must try to bridge a kind of gap which exists between psychiatry and non-understanding of the need for social psychiatry. Now, this is very, very significant. I request that kindly mute your mic because it is. Please mute your mic. Anyway, thank you. So, to my point, as far as therapeutical interventions are concerned, as far as medical interventions are concerned, we cannot do without psychiatry, but we need to supplement it with social psychiatry, which provides a wider understanding of what constitutes or what creates the conditions which make people mentally sick in our society. And I think I would like to refer to one of such situation in which I had a dialogue with my colleagues, psychiatric colleagues, who were very senior professors in psychiatry working with World Health Organization, where I also had the opportunity to work for some time. Now, it was a situation where a case was to be decided whether it was a case of epilepsy or a case of hysteria. And ultimately, when we reflected significantly on the psychosociological processes, the family background, the family pressures which were affecting a particular woman in a particular household, then it ultimately came out to be a case of hysteria rather than a case of epilepsy. And therefore, it avoided medical interventions which could include at that particular point of time, Gardinal was one medicine, Luminal was another medicine which was given so that the motor activity is not disrupted and a particular behavior doesn't occur. And hysteria required social assurance to the person. It required assurance which needed verbal dialogue, which needed social support system. And that's what I would say that when we are talking about mental health or sociology of deviant behavior, then we have to have to go into these processes which are very, very significant. Another thing which I would like to refer to here is on deviant behavior. Now, The question is whether the people are deviant or it is the society which is deviant. And one of my work, which I did as part of my master degree program in sociology at Punjab University, a dissertation which I developed on hijras, and hijras are known to almost every one of us, and their presence earlier used to be during the marriages or after marriages or at the birth of a boy in some family. But then when I started dealing with this particular phenomenon, whether they are deviant or the society is deviant, then history was one important dimension which needed considerable attention in developing and answering this question. Now, if we go back to the Mughal period, or we go to the Western society, where there are phenomena like transvestites, or nowadays we are talking about third gender, etc., or asexuals. But ultimately, when we talk to these people, we understand their psychology. We try to understand their understanding of the society. I found that they were better understanding the society than what we, the educated, were reflecting upon. One of the examples, during 1970s, mid-70s, you know that family planning was at its peak. And one question was posed to these people, to group of hijras, that when the family planning interventions are restricting fertility and the number of children born are also going down, doesn't it affect your livelihood? Doesn't it affect your earning? The simple reply was that if the society benefits, if the people benefit out of family planning, then we also benefit because we are part of the society. So it is the society which has kept us away. Now that made me to title my book, which was later published as Hijras, the Labeled Deviants. They are not deviants, but they have been labeled as such. So we need to have, as Professor Nagla also reflected on, that history is important, and Professor Gupta also emphasized on this point. I think in sociological understanding, we must need historical understanding of Indian society. Only then we are in a position to understand things in sociology or sociologically. And lastly, I would like to emphasize that in exploring into the perspectives, we must also try to look into the cultural perspective of the phenomenon, which is helpful in resolving the contradictions and in the mediation of binaries which exist and which also create oppositions in the society. And this particular dimension I am referring to with reference to my own study of hijras, where I say that when the Western sociological paradigms fail to explain this phenomenon, the cultural perspective of Ardhanareshwara is able to explain and also create a binary between the man and the woman. And with these words, I would like to say that when we go through Professor Nagla's works, we come across many of such processes, such kind of perspectives, which make us understand society in a better perspective. I thank the organizers. I thank Professor Gupta for his brilliant interventions, Professor Ansari, and our younger and good friend, colleague Sagarika, Sipra, and also Professor Giri, Professor Randhir, Gautam, and all those who have been present during this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Sharma. And you brought out so important ways of the whole craft of critical theorizing, creativity, creator were approaching, and also the socio-historical dimension, so important. So, dear friends, now let us have threads of conversations. Again, with the uncertainty of my internet, I would request Professor Abhishek Kumar to nurture this conversation in case some contingency happens. So now we invite friends, you please share your thoughts, and we would listen to all our friends, and then we would invite Professor Nagla to make some comments. So beginning with Professor Nagla, please. And in fact, Professor Nagla, I found your book on gender on my journey recently. I'm very interested. We would also invite you to, tell gender, which I found, during my travel. I think she's not coming. And then other friends, please. Abhishek,
Good evening,
Professor Abhishek
Professor
Kumar, and
Bagla.
Dr.
Yeah, good evening,
Hello.
Professor Bagla, Professor Ansari. I have put this question in the chat box also. I was particularly interested in psychoanalytic aspect of sociology. So, say group psychology, how do you think that contributes to the discipline of sociology? How do we, especially in cultures like India, where hierarchy and power structures are of such importance? How do you see this?
Let me take all the question, or we go for one by one.
I think let's take a few questions together and then.
That would be. I keep in mind your question.
Yes, sir.
Professor Nagla,
Aye.
one observation, and I would like to have your response. You have discussed so many scholars, and we are also discussing so many scholars. For example, you have discussed Paul Brass and others when you were
Yeah.
talking about factualism. It is all right when we do our work, when we do make our contribution. But when we go to the classroom transaction, all these scholars and their arguments are missing. Is it not an injustice with the students that they do not understand Paul Brass, and Paul Brass is understood only by Professor Nagla?
It's a very important question. You are actually my thinking that when we go to the classroom, we should give idea about these scholars first, and then we analyze critically in our own way. So that would be, because many times the students are not aware of these scholars. What is
Yes.
their ideas? What is their, so first we should make them aware about their concept or ideas. So then you can say that my idea is different, how their idea is different. So you can correlate in this cohibition of the ideas also, in that way also. So another, Abhishek was talking about this psychiatric and long
Group
subject.
psychology. Group psychology.
Group psychology. So actually, when I was in, actually, what I told that whatever I have written on the basis of different social conditioning or my different situation of life chances. So when I was in Baroda, and when we had very, I mean, small students and class, there was not proper classes. So my head of the department, he used to say that you talk about the small group laboratory and you talk about a small, as you put the actions. So why I am saying that how people interact with the in a small group, and that is very important. Regarding the this mental illness problem, there are two things. There are some people who are in the med house, and there are some people who are also outside med house. And because of outside med house, people create the problem to us to push other people to go in the mental problems, because of their suppression, because of our dominations. So one has to look in the, when you talk about the group mentality, you have to talk in the interactive way in the group, and then you can understand. And this is possible when you have a small group for interaction and you discuss in this. And that's why in creative engagement we did give that friendly learning in that context. What is the your opinion? How do you criticize? How do you give your own interpretation? This is possible when you have in a group interaction in that way.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Professor Abhishek has raised a very interesting question, sir. When we talk about the relationship between sociology and psychology, generally one important argument appears: society in individual or individual in society. These two things are interrelated. I think when we talk about the individual or when we talk about even the group, the concept of attitude, the concept of aspiration, and the relationship of aspiration and attitude with the power structure of the society. In my opinion, power itself is a psychological connotation, because as an individual, we have both the courage and the lack of courage, the aggression and the elementary forms of cooperation and coordination. So we are, in fact, a personality of dialectics and dilemma. When they move for understanding any social issue, or when such kind of dilemma and dialectics enter into the sphere of social relations, I think group psychology, but in the context of individuality, it becomes important. So I think power, aspiration, and attitude, these things together should be understood for understanding any social reality.
So, because all these ideas, whether it is hierarchy, power structures, all of them we carry inside our minds.
Definitely.
And they reflect in collectives also. So whether, like Professor Bagla said, small group, and sometimes even in large groups. Say nowadays organizations are very large. lakhs of people work there. And when we say organizational culture, so somehow they try to assimilate in the and therefore I think sociology, I'm sure it's already studying, and that element must also be looked at.
Definitely, and we are also interested in deliberating several issues related to organizational psychology. Now, it has become a
Yes.
very important component to understand what managers are doing. So, management on the one hand and organizational psychology on the other. I think
So that's why it's very important the attitude according to attitude, how does it reflects to the mind of others also. And it gives aggression, and aggression leads to the frustration. And when it is again, it is not covered up, frustration leads to the aggression also.
exactly.
That is the process in that way also. Sometimes, for example, one is dominating person, he's trying to suppress. So other also is getting aggression, but he is not able to ventilate his aggression, and he ventilates it somewhere else. For example, in a simple way, a peon is dominated by his superordinate, his dominant persons. He also develops aggression simultaneously, but he cannot ventilate. When he goes to home, and he ventilate to his children, he ventilate to his wife. The process is like that also. So one has to lead them, and that's why the attitude of a person's it is very important that way also. One should look in that, whether it is a small group or a big group. It is in the process of interaction and
Professor Nagla, it is very
interaction process
interesting.
where Rajiv has talked about power, hierarchy, and so these things are related in that context also.
And
So
in fact,
hierarchical understanding.
it becomes the base to understand what Ashish Nandi and Veena Das are arguing. Ashish Nandi in Intimate Enemies and Veena Das when she talks about structure of violence, all these things together raise so many psychological issues.
In day-to-day life also, superordinate, subordinate in modern day, this is a this IT industry is there. The whole IT industry is in that relationship also. One can find it.
Yes, sir. The way it started during Industrial Revolution, and from that emerged trade union movement and so on. So perhaps something similar will emerge now from IT and technology industry.
Things are moving in the same direction.
Yes, sir. Are there more questions, observations, comments? Otherwise, we can call it a day.
Yeah, I wanted to say something.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is Professor Anil Kumar from Central University of Himachal Pradesh. Good evening to everyone. Perhaps mine is a naive student's question, but it originates from Professor Gupta's observation regarding how Professor Nagla's book on sociological thought becomes vital for learning sociological theory. So, since any classical thought is often perceived as speculative or moralistic, so I'm curious that at what point does Indian social thought, which is the wisdom and observations of our history, cross the threshold to become sociological theory? So, is this transition primarily a matter of adopting scientific methodology, or is it more a matter of recognition and legitimacy within the global academic community? And I mean, not just Professor Nagla, anybody can respond to this question. Thank you.
So, first of all, how are you, Anil?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Anil.
Yeah.
It's a
He's
very
enjoying Himachal Pradesh.
and
Yeah.
Himachal.
We recently met
Dharamshala
Professor
and the Central
Nagla. I
University
had to drop him to railway station. We were
in
running.
Jammu recently.
Yeah.
Now, in fact, it's a very interesting kind of understanding which is taking place in the field of social sciences. I think Professor Anil might have gone through a very important work called On History by Eric Hobsbawm. He was, in fact, discussing some important concerns related to historians' understanding. How history is used. That's why this question is raised. Is history a method to understand several kind of realities of the past so that the relationship between past and present and the future possibilities could be understood, maybe of very ambiguous nature, but future perspective can be understood if past and present are related with several kind of objective but critical causalities. This is an important proposition. What is happening now? Now, other way around is coming up. I think this is an important part for me. How does historians constructing or reshaping the present? I am again using the term reshaping or reconstructing present on the basis of those choices which they are treating as past. Now, is past becoming a prejudice? Is past becoming a mythical kind of understanding? Or is past becoming selective at all? Now, if history is understood on the basis of these prejudicial dimensions, then probably a shift, which I was talking about, that from a shift from history as a method to treat history as tool of identity and authority. If these things appear in the understanding of social sciences, then a possible threat is coming up. If history is ruined, I am using the term ruined. If history is ruined on the basis of some selective kind of mythical constructions, then issue arises and there is a need to expose such kind of understanding related to the history and the understanding of the present. And that's why Professor Nagla's contribution while discussing Romila Thapar and Didi Kosambi become important. When we introduced Didi Kosambi in his very seminal work, An Introduction to the Study of Indian History, we find not only the materialistic foundation of history, which is based upon Marxian logic, but the element of culture, which Didi Kosambi was driving on the basis of that traveling which he was doing. So what kind of culture is coming up? Cultural materialism on the one hand and materialistic related to productive forces on the other side. If these things are synthesized to understand Indian history, or for that matter, history of any world or history of any society, then probably the history and society, in terms of a very objective and the integrative kind of understanding to the field of social sciences may occur.
Anil,
Thank you, Professor
I
Gupta.
argue in
Yeah.
my writing collectively for a sociology that moves beyond imitation toward contextual, plural, reflexive knowledge productions. So, as Rajiv explained it, but I try to put in a sentence that how I explained in my argument, how I develop in the whole writings about it. whether it is related to Indian sociological thought or for other process also you can look it into that.
I just add one or two lines.
Yes, sir.
I share the concern Professor Gupta has with the kind of challenges which are coming up because of selective history. But the point is that when we are trying to understand a society and when we become selective, we ultimately arrive at an understanding which has a lot of contradictions. So therefore, selective had always been a challenge. If we go back to the history of society, there has always been a challenge because certain kind of because there are two things. One is that there is a set of historians who are always selective and a kind of part of the Raj Darbar.
Yeah, sure.
And there are always critics whose voices may remain subdued for certain point of time or during certain point of time.
Yes, yes.
But ultimately, the contradictions of the society in the absence of objective history make their voices loud again. And that's what we are now also witnessing in the Indian society. The repression is there, but the kind of social media which is emerging, now that is signaling that the challenges can also be met with some voices coming up. That's what I would like to add.
Yeah,
It
good.
is a context sensitive. Yeah.
Anil, sir.
No, I'm actually very excited, although I know that we are trying to wind up here. Um, I'm glad that to hear these responses, and I was thinking that I should arrange a separate talk only on this issue. And actually my question uh, had originated from my end because I also take interest in philosophy of social sciences. So I was just wondering, while social thought is often seen as a broad philosophical tradition and theory as a scientific tool, and when we look at a book on sociological thought, in Indian context particularly, they seem inseparable. Like the thought and the theory, they seem inseparable. So perhaps I had a direct question whether Professor Nagla or anybody, those who were responding, whether they believe that developing a distinct Indian sociological theory is possible without first decolonizing the social thought that predates the Western academic model. And also, however, classical thought is often speculative or moralistic, as I was already saying. So, how does these works, they translate these ancient or traditional Indian social values into the scientific, testable, or even empirical theories that sociologists can use to study any modern phenomena like urbanization or digital labor or any other modern issue that we are looking at in any society.
I think, Anil, sir, knowledge goes beyond boundaries. Thought and theories also go beyond boundaries. So definitely we can construct some kind of Indian sociological thought or even Indian sociological theory, as Ahmed has done it when he talks about in theory. Several literary theories are coming up to address several issues. But I think to discuss any theoretical construction based upon a particular society or a particular nation state, might be parochial, and that may satisfy us that we are having a wide system of knowledge. But as far as the future of the world or global knowledge is concerned, it will not be of much fruitful nature. But definitely, one thing cannot be denied. Right from the beginning, with the emergence and the advancement of human civilization, or for that matter, even the Indian civilization, the contributions of various scholars, whether you like it or not like it, but their contributions must be understood on the basis of that kind of duration in which they were writing or living. What we are doing, we are taking their arguments and constructing the narratives of the present. And that is the most dangerous kind of thing, which is taking place in the sphere of social sciences. That's why I do not know whether you might have gone through this. In Jaipur, Rajasthan University, we introduced Jaipur experiment in the field of philosophy. Professor S.C. Dubey, Professor Daya Krishna, they were there, and all, the status of Indian society, the philosophical understanding of Indian society, and entire social science world on the basis of philosophy. That was discussed upon, and Professor Daya Krishna in Indian intellectual tradition, he had written a very important work. I think it is published by Oxford. In that work, the entire thing related to Jaipur experiment and the role of Professor S.C. Dubey and others in this context has been there. So we have a very strong philosophical tradition. But what is happening today? When we talk about Indian philosophy, is it not Hindu philosophy at all? And even if we are discussing Hindu philosophy, then why not several kind of discussions and debates which were coming up? And the philosophy which we find in South, or philosophical tradition which we find in Northeast, all these things are missing. Several kind of philosophical traditions are found in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and we are not discussing as if they are not the part of the Hindu philosophy or Indian philosophy. So we are selective in this sense, or we are fragmented.
Also, on a lighter note, I want to share that recently I asked this question about distinction from Professor Judge.
Okay.
I was attending one of the talks and I asked him this question and he laughed and he said, please don't bother. So I thought I will share here.
No, Neil, but in the classroom, when we go to that, what we are teaching in the classroom, there's there's a debate, sociology in India, sociology of India, sociology for India. So what we teach and what we do research and what should we? So philosophically, how do we explore in that context? Then we can analyze the things also. So that's why I just told him that he laughs at that, don't bother about it because let it go like this.
Yes, I took it seriously because I realized if this distinction does not matter, Indian sociological thought in itself, it already has that right to be called a theory, at least in Indian context.
I was participating in that. He raised this issue with Paramjit.
You were there.
Yes, I was there.
He was also matlab, intent to attend, but he was invited in some other things.
Very intelligent. He is one of the sociologists of the present generation who can create a sense of pride for us.
Real cognitive understanding.
I'm glad to see all you here and thank you for all your responses.
I am also thankful to all of you that you have gone through my writing and you have given me the observations and comments.
Sir,
So
in
I'm very
fact, let
thankful.
me also acknowledge that in Himachal Pradesh, it was also a new teaching experience for me, because I never knew that Hindi is the sole medium here. So we are always short of literature in Hindi. So almost every student uh, is grateful to your works, since you have been writing in Hindi. And there is a student also from our MA final semester, and he wants to ask something. Subrajit, you can speak.
Hello, sir. Sir, my question aligns with what Anil sir just said. Sir, I recently made an observation that sociology is often studied in India through Western academic and colonial biases. Taking example like religion, when we study Western religions, they are called theology, which is like implying a rational believer-led study of faith. But when we come to Eastern religions, the narrative is like symbolic stories, not systematic doctrines, especially after the post colonial encounters. So, my question is, how do we keep colonial bias away from studying Indian sociology? And there are often chances when we are studying Indian sociology through Indian perspective. There are chances of like ethnocentric biases. Like suppose we say like, oh, whatever we are doing or whatever is in Indian society, it is superior or it is correct. So how do we keep that bias away, like that bias away as well while studying Indian society?
Actually, when we always talk about Western theory or Western model, but there are some universal, as we our classical thinkers, like started with my narration even itself, that Marx, Weber, Durkheim, their universal category we have taken. But we have to think in our context also. That's why we talked about contexture. And context also, context sensitiveness means context means how people feel it, how people realize it. One has to understand that thing, and then when we understand, we try to put in our Indianized categories of whatever the or that's why Indianized, Arvinder Ansari raised the question that when we talk about Indianized, what type of concept we develop it, that is also important. For example, in India, we didn't have a much broader theorization in our subject, but in the beginning, like Srinivas and other people, they have started developing a simple concept, Sanskritization, dominant caste, even the concept given by reference group, even it is a concept of the Merton, but reference group pattern, why with Amle. So in Indian context, we should develop the things, and accordingly there are some categorizations, a general theory and your smaller middle range theory. You have to keep in that context, then you can understand how Indianization indigenization is indigenization. It is not the problem of our Indian society. It is a problem throughout the world. When the Indianization situation is appear like Canada, America, France, everywhere is there. So when their problem is there, one has to understand the structure of that society. Even our earlier thinkers like D.P. Mukherjee, Radhakamal Mukherjee, they said we cannot understand the Indian structure because Indian structure is distinct from the Western countries. So Western theory cannot be applied it. So in that context, we have to understand our Indian society in our own way, and we have to develop in that way. So this is a general problem to everywhere.
All right. I think it has been a long day. So thank you very much, everyone, all the participants, Professor Bagla, Professor Gupta, uh, Professor Ansari, and everyone else who asked their questions and gave their observations. So thank you very much. On behalf of Professor Anant Giri, I convey my gratitude to everyone. And thanks a lot. Have a good evening.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
It was a great pleasure, rather academic pleasure to listen all
And
of
I
it.
thank to the organizer again to have a dialogue, particularly on my today and on my writings. And I am thankful to all my friends, Rajiv, Anil, Satish, and Arvinder, Ansari, Sipra, those who participated, and other friends, those who are listening it. Thank you to all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Bye. Bye.